Welcome back to the Tracy Take. I'm Tyler here with my brother Ryan, and today we are breaking down the Philadelphia Eagles 2024 offseason. We're going to go over all the departures, free agent acquisitions, and update their current roster for you guys, both offense and defense. And then lastly, we will be reviewing the 2024 schedule and then giving our final record predictions. So be sure to stay tuned for the entire episode so you can see how we think the Eagles are going to do this offseason. But before we do that, if you haven't already, like this video, subscribe to the Tracy Take, and also ring that bell to get notified when we create new content. We have content coming out every Monday through Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. We're currently in the middle of our offseason recap series. So if you want to go check out our previous videos that we've done the NFC South and AFC South, and we're wrapping up the NFC East here this week, and we're going to be starting the AFC East next week. So to get notified when those videos come out, be sure to ring that bell. And Ryan, let's pull up the Eagles slides here. So we started off here with the 2023 team rankings in certain positions here. This is from Pro Football Reference as well. And as you can see here, offensively, still one of the top offenses in the league. A couple more turnovers, I think, than they would like, but it's kind of almost maybe regressing to the mean a little bit, and we'll talk a little bit about that here in a second. But offensively, though, I think a lot of these numbers, why they're towards the latter in the top 10, especially the two passing, actually just average overall. I think a lot of it was heavy outliers towards the later part of the season. I feel like this offense just kind of just hit a dud, so to say. And even too, as I'm saying that, let me even just pull up in these team offense. If you go look at week 17 and week 18, only 275 and 299 yards of total offense. So those are some big outliers compared to what they were doing early on in the season. They had a 4-game stretch from week 2 to week 5 where they had 430-plus yard games of total offense here. And that was kind of the big theme as well. Offensively, just something happened in the locker room or whatnot, or just play on the field of just that team. Just that it wasn't the offense of what we saw in 2022. But that wasn't their biggest concern in 2023. Their defense was definitely not the defense that we saw in 2022. Biggest thing as well, Ryan, is that you like to point out as well, just their sacks. They were 20th in overall sacks on the defense when they had a historic year in 2022 with how many sacks that they had. And a lot of that, too, I think, showed a lot of flaws in the secondary, as we can see in their passing stats here. And we're going to kind of break down a little bit more of this as we go through their departures and their acquisitions. But Ryan, I spoke a lot. I probably actually said the majority of the main talking points you were going to have.
Yeah.
But what was your kind of overall thoughts on this Eagles team coming into the 2024 offseason, some of the areas that they needed to address?
Yeah. So, one, I'm very curious how this team is going to bounce back at the beginning of this season, starting out 1-6, finishing the season 1-6. How do they bounce back this offseason? I know they added a few pieces on offense that we'll get to later. They also lost a few as well. And then defensively, just rebuilding that secondary is going to be crucial. Being able to get more pressure on the quarterback, because going from 1st to 20th, especially without any real major personnel changes that I can remember from 22 to 23, is a little shocking in my opinion. But yeah, to me that secondary is clearly the biggest weak link. That's the only number on this page that's in the 30s. And when you're in the 30s on this, it's usually not a good spot to be. So I was a little interested to see that their rushing defense was 23rd. I thought it would have been better. However, I do feel like with their passing defense being so bad, like the secondary being so bad, maybe they were running some smaller packages to maybe help alleviate some of the load put on the outside corner specifically. But again, this defense had a pretty big drop off in 2023, and that to me was probably one of the biggest things to look for going forward. So let's move on to their departures at the start of this offseason here. So the two big ones, Jason Kelce and Fletcher Cox, both retired. Those are two Eagles Hall of Famers. Jason Kelce was probably the best center in the league for the last 5 to 8 years.
One of the best centers to play the game. So,
yeah, exactly. So, like, again, those guys are going to be really hard to replace. Kevin Byard went to Chicago. Hassan Reddick went to the Jets. Nicholas Morrow to Buffalo. DeAndre Swift left. Sua Opeta left. Olamide Zaccheaus left. We are now getting into some smaller role playing names. It's just interesting to kind of see like those first 6 names. I think were all guys that played a pretty significant amount of time for them.
Yeah, I would say too. Yeah, those first four are big ones.
Yeah,
Are the biggest ones. Everybody else outside of that, they either uh, significantly replaced them, such as like the two running backs that we'll
yeah,
talk to in a second. As there's some big running back moves made by the Eagles, if you hadn't heard. But I also think then too, this is going to be obvious, but just the leadership that both of these guys brought to the Eagles team. Jason Kelsey, Fletcher
mhm,
Cox, been with the organization forever. There's going to be that changing of the tide, like who's going to be that team leader in that locker room. And because one of the things too, and you brought it up a lot, but it just seemed like there was that second half of the year, just the team just
no
couldn't mesh
leadership.
well. Yeah,
Yeah,
well, just couldn't mesh well at all. It's like it was just some on the field stuff, or they were just off rhythm. Just who knows? And so I'm very curious into now who's going to be that person then that steps up because that's where going to be kind of theme. I feel like of this video, just a lot of questions overall.
yeah.
But I will say though, outside of those top four guys, there's not anybody else really that was just shockingly like wow, like I can't believe they let this guy go. And so especially then also when we get to the acquisitions here in a second or now.
Oh,
And so, yeah,
sorry.
let's move on now. And so, linebacker position, for example, then they brought in a lot of guys as well, like Zach Bond, Orrin Banks, Julian Aguara, and Devin White as well. And so then I think that they getting back CJ Gardner Johnson, I think was going to be huge for this team as well. Because at least when they went on the Super Bowl run, he was at least in that secondary as well. Just kind of add on to the massive changes that they made. But I think they've got that defensive line set for a long time. I know they moved on from Hassan Reddick. He was their sack leader last year, but they've thrown a lot of pieces to that side there, and they have a good defensive line. But I think adding some good linebacking depth as well, because I always thought they had a weak linebacking core. So adding some more bodies there, and then really addressing the secondary, getting C.J. Gardner-Johnson back on Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean also. I'm very curious to now see how the secondary shapes up as well, kind of how
Mhm.
training camp goes for all of these guys.
Yeah, exactly. And so this secondary, I think it's going to be better. It's definitely going to be more explosive. I am curious to see like the departures. James Bradbury, Darius Slay are still in that secondary room. So I'm very curious to see what Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean can do kind of coming in. But then even like you go later in that draft, getting Jeremiah Trotter Jr., I think at the very least is a fantastic story. Johnny Wilson, I thought was good depth. People thought he would go, or good value. People thought he would go at the end of the third, maybe early fourth round. Will Shipley, I was a big fan of Anaya Smith out of Texas A&M. So I like a lot of their draft picks, a lot of their signings. I think Saquon Barkley, I don't know if we've really touched on him enough. The Giants had one of the worst offensive lines in history last year, and he still, if he played all 17 games, would have been 1,000-yard rusher. Uh,
Yeah.
and like you go, this offensive line is definitely going to regress, in my opinion, with the loss of Jason Kelsey. You just don't replace a Hall of Fame center like that overnight, and like it's definitely going to regress. With that being said, with Saquon Barkley back there, their running game could still actually probably improve as a whole, just because of how effective Saquon Barkley can be.
Yeah.
So, like, I
Well,
really like that move.
and I was thinking about this as well because I knew this was going to be the next video that we shot. So I was thinking about it today then on like why obviously Saquon Barkley is a great player, but like what can he bring to the team compared to what they had last year? And that's when in 2022 Miles Sanders had an amazing year for this team for the team, dual threat capabilities, and they had and also just a good running back bench as well with Kenneth Gainwell and Boston Scott also back there as well to keep giving him rest. But in general, the Miles Sanders was the guy. I think he had 1,200 rushing yards on this season. I think he had 600 or something like that receiving yards. I have to go back and double check exactly. I'll do that here in a second. They didn't have that last year, though. DeAndre Swift just is a shell of the guy, unfortunately, just with the injuries that they had, that he's had throughout his career. So that running back threat wasn't entirely there. Offensive line was really good, but yeah, I think it allowed for them to maybe defenses to put an extra guy back in secondary to help cover A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith or Dallas Goedert or any of the guys that they had, Quez Watkins, Julio Jones. Uh, and so now I think that when you put Saquon Barkley back there, though, all right, if you want to put six guys in the box, like I I still believe that their offensive line is going to be good enough to where I will take Saquon Barkley behind that Eagles offensive line any day of the week with six
Yeah,
guys in the box. I think it's going to force teams to put seven guys in the box. So now if you got Jalen Hurts back there, well, just Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley, just with their running capabilities alone, is going to be crazy. But so now you got them back there, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas good there, and then let's say even the nice Smith pans out. We're going to get to the depth chart here in a second, but they did also sign Paris Campbell here as well. So whoever that third receiver is that they want to kind of figure out, you have a three receiver set, or just 11 personnel with Saquon Barkley in the backfield, and shoot, if they have six guys in the box, be like, okay, we're going to run the ball this play. Then if they put seven guys in the box, you know that you're going to have one-on-one matchups. So I think it creates a lot of open opportunities here for this Eagles offense to really expand
yeah,
and get the matchups that they want. And they just didn't really have that last year with the running game, but they had that in 2022 under Miles Sanders. So I think just Saquon Barkley allure is going to really open up this offense. Whether or not he'll probably have
yeah.
1,000 rushing yards, he'll
Well,
probably catch 500 yards receiving or whatnot. But just his presence, I think at minimum is going to be just a great decoy for AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, all these other guys just to eat and it
well,
just
yeah. The
to
the
devour
one
the
thing
secondary.
the one thing that you didn't even mention is Jalen Hurts running. Also, he's a fantastic runner of the football as well, and so I think you put Saquon Barkley back there, and this Eagles offense, they would love to run RPOs anyways. Now you
Mm-hmm.
have one of the best running backs in the league, one of the best running quarterbacks in the league, and I mean, what were they? 16th in passing last year after a horrible skid to end the year. So
Yeah,
so
yeah,
I that could be a really really dangerous offense. But again, the one thing that I come back to is they were 1-5 in their last 6 games last year, so they need to have that chemistry. They need to be all playing together. But let's get into their offensive depth chart
and
here.
one in
So
six if you include the playoffs.
1-6, that's fair.
Yeah,
But yeah, so starting out here, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Paris Campbell is slotted in at that slot wide receiver. Get into this offensive line, and it's pretty much the same. 4 out of the 5 names are the same. Jordan Mailata, Landon Dickerson, nothing changed on that left side. Cam Jurgens was the guard last year. He kicks into center. Tyler Steen, the third round pick from 2023, is slotted in to be the starting right guard. And then you have Lane Johnson going into his 11th year in the league. I think very impressive there, just longevity. Uh, that offensive line, I'm curious to kind of hear your opinions on where you think that offensive line would rank amongst some of the other teams now that Jason Kelsey is no longer the center.
I would still think it would be up there because we've seen Landon Dickerson and Cam Jurgens and Tyler. Like
Hmm.
they've all played. They're young and there's a high upside with them as well. They've also got to play with Jason Kelsey and see how he has conducted business and learn from him on his overall techniques and reading defense. So I think that they'll be fine. If this was their starting lineup, like I would think this would be
Yeah.
top 16 in the league, so above average. I think this is still going to be the storyline for me, though, of uh, just how this interior offensive line does shape up. It probably will be
Hmm.
Cam. It will probably be this exactly.
He
I
was
will
the
say
center at Memphis, I believe, when he was drafted.
Cam Jurgens.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. I'll double check that here in a second. But I will say, just to kind of just touch on, I will say Matt Hennessy coming from Atlanta, he was the center for them, but he didn't play at all last year because he got hurt in training camp. He was okay during his time there. Maybe like could have seen some improvements. He was also there on some bad Falcons teams as well. So there's only so much
Yeah.
maybe the center can add to that. I just curious to see. At minimum, he's gonna be a great depth piece. It could come in case if somebody gets hurt. So there's a lot of versatility there. So that just to me is going to be the biggest uh, battle to watch is that interior offensive
Yeah.
line. It will probably be this. Cam Jurgens is probably going to be the center.
Yeah.
We've been told that. We've been reading that for the past couple of years now that Cam Jurgens is going to be the guy post Jason Kelsey. And so, but we'll have to kind of just go and wait and see kind of how this training camp goes.
The other storyline I think here is how does this wide receiver room shape up? Because they have AJ Brown, they have Devontae Smith. I believe they both got extensions this offseason.
Mhm.
Uh, and but other than that, Paris Campbell has largely been a failed wide receiver. They have two rookies behind that. Joseph Ngata was an undrafted free agent from last year's class, and then everybody else are undrafted free agents from this year's class or 2022 with
Yeah.
Britton Covey. So that's not a very experienced room. I know you have that top end talent in AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, but you need third, fourth, fifth guys in a wide receiver room to really be effective. And I will say they do run a lot of two tight end sets. So they have Dallas Goddard, CJ Uzoma, Grant Calcaterra, Albert Okoye-Bunam. Like all of those guys have played at an NFL level
Yeah.
uh, before. And so maybe they are planning on just running more like heavy tight end sets. But interesting to see. It reminds me a little bit of San Francisco after Debo and after Brandon Ayuk. They have Jawan Jennings, who I think is maybe a little underrated. He did just get extended in San Francisco as well. But after that, we saw like some of those guys got injured in the middle of the year last year, and their offensive play fell off dramatically.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you said this name line is a sketch you like, but very curious to see how Nia Smith does. Because I
Yeah.
think when you put his speed on the field with AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, and just how many other weapons that they have on there, uh, I think that'd be very interesting
Yeah.
to see because he's going to be their third receiver on the field with his overall speed can create easy separation from them or some set, easy set plays just to get him the ball in his hands. So very curious to kind of see how that offense shapes up. So I do agree with you there. I will say kind of where probably my most interest is going to be is on the defensive side of the ball as we move on to their depth chart. And their front line pretty much straightforward as well. Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter is going to be the guys like the main defensive lineman there. And then they did add Bryce Huff as well from the Jets this offseason. And then there's still some other guys like the popular names like Nakobe Dean is also in there as well. They still have Nolan Smith that they drafted in the first round last year, also to go on with Jalen Carter. But I just think how the linebacking room and then also to how the secondary shape up as well. Like Darius Slade Jr., he's going to be the guy, but I think there's going to be a big battle here between James Bradbury, and Quentin Mitchell. They already have Quentin Mitchell as the first string guy. Cooper DeJean, how is he going to end up looking? Is potentially is he going to take Reed Blankenship's spot, or is him and Avonte Maddox going to have a competition? I think there's going to be some serious heavy battles in the linebacking room and also the secondary positions as well for starting spots. Because honestly, I look at it. Eagles fans, you guys know better than us. Josh Sweat, I think, is starting. They say outside linebacker. I kind of look at him more maybe as an edge rusher. I would say like the
Yeah.
modern day edge rusher. Um, but I don't think any of those guys are clear cut starters outside of maybe Darius Slay.
Yeah.
I think that'd be the only guy. CJ Gardner Johnson probably will be the starting spot just because of he's coming back to a team where he had so much success and he just left for a year, but now he's back. So, but I think there's going to be so many great battles watching in
Yeah.
Eagles training camp and seeing how those guys develop, seeing who comes out on top. That's going to be the storyline to me because this team was atrocious in the secondary last year, and so part of it was they lost a lot of sacks as well compared to 2022. But still, it just was not
Yeah.
a good overall performance.
And I think just to kind of explain what I mean by that is, uh, and kind of what I mean by that is this secondary might have made a lot more mistakes in 2022 that were covered up by just how good this front seven was and how easily they got after the quarterback. Not saying that
Yeah,
they were bad in 2022. It's just some of the mistakes in 2022 that were covered up weren't necessarily covered up in 2023. So,
no,
all in all, to me, this secondary as well, I think they have a few battles there going on, maybe in that front seven, but I think largely they have good depth there. Fairly clear, I think, on who's going to be starting. And those outside linebackers will probably be rotated in. You'll have set starters, but I think Nolan Smith, um, and then like Brandon Graham for sure will definitely be rotated in on like true passing downs. And you'll have different packages there. But I am curious. Cooper DeJean was one of my favorite prospects in this class just because of his overall athleticism and kind of
yeah,
what he brought to the table. If you haven't heard his story of like just what he did in high school. He was like an all-state track athlete. He was an all-state basketball player, all-state football player. Just every athletic endeavor that the kid went on, he was successful in. And so I'm very curious to see kind of how he translates to the NFL because he is a little stiffer in the hips. That was probably one of the big reasons why he fell. And so a lot of people think he's going to transition over to safety, which could be a good thing. He played all over the secondary at Iowa. So very curious to see where he fits in. Quinion Mitchell, like you said, already seems to be slotted in as a starting spot. And then what happens with James Bradbury? The guy's played some really good football. They end up trading him and then keeping depth with Keely Ringo, Makai Garner. It really anybody, Avante Maddox as well. So
Yeah.
just really curious to see what the Eagles do. Howie Roseman does a great job uh, maneuvering roster cut downs and things to either get assets or keep players on IR or whatnot. But
And I think too, before we move on to 2024 schedule, and as the point made up, I think another reason why I think they did a good job this offseason was then how many draft picks they were able to get them for next year's draft class as well. I
yeah,
think it was they now have an
they have
extra,
extra third, fourth, and fifth round picks next year at
and that's a
least.
key. That's a key spot. You can find a lot of good, valuable players during that area. It's tough to obviously get inside the top 64 with the second, first round picks, but uh, to get another pick in the top 100 as well, and then the fourth and fifth round as well, be picking early when it comes to day three. Just having that extra maneuverability can really allow a lot of flexibility for the team to go after a guy during the middle of the season or post in the early part of the 2025 offseason, make a trade and go get a guy and use some of those extra draft picks and still then get it, bring in enough young players in next year's rookie draft class, even if it's 7 or 8, just to have a good young core, fresh group of guys that you can try and develop.
Yeah. So let's move on to the schedule here. Starting off, pretty tough start, I think, to the season, especially for a team that had some struggles later on and also got off to a slow start in 2023. In my opinion, the New England game and Minnesota, two slower games. Starting off, Green Bay and Brazil, and then Atlanta on Monday Night Football. Two teams I think that are going to be really good this year. Green Bay really probably was the best team at the end of the season last year. They just made some untimely mistakes against San Francisco and kind of gave that game away.
Mm-hmm.
And then Atlanta made a lot of good moves this offseason and brought in Kirk Cousins. This wide receiver group is really good. This defense was good last year, and then they go out and bring in Raheem Morris as well. So I like those. At New Orleans, at Tampa Bay, they have a Week 5 bye, which is not favorable to teams like Philadelphia that are expecting to make a late January push, and then Cleveland as well. So 3 really tough games in my opinion, and then maybe 2 games they probably should win. However, they lost to Tampa Bay in the playoffs last year. So
Yeah. And so I'm looking at this. I think if you're 3-2 through this, I think that would be acceptable. But to your point, the Green Bay, Atlanta, those are going to be interesting games, especially very early on in the season. And so I think Green Bay is going to be really tough. I think Green Bay could be one of the best teams in the NFL. Tampa Bay, like last time we saw them in Tampa was at the end of the season. They just didn't look good at all. I think Cleveland is going to be interesting. These first 5 teams are going to be so many question marks just with how the Eagles are going to play, but also too how the other teams are going to play as well. The easiest game on this schedule though so far is that Saints game, but that is on the road, so who knows what happens there. But then they get at New York Giants, at Cincinnati, and then hosting Jacksonville, at Dallas, and then they do Washington Football on Thursday Night Football, and then at Los Angeles Rams, and then at Baltimore as well, and then wrap up this middle section here hosting Carolina. And this is a pretty tough stretch just because at Giants, if I'm not mistaken, I don't think Philly's won in New York for some time now, and they got stopped in there in Week 18, which wasn't good. Cincinnati, who knows, probably going to be building back up again. Jacksonville's also, I think, building back up. At Dallas, NFC East division rival, who knows what's going to happen there. Then their short week going with Washington. I think that they're going to be better than Washington, but once again, a lot of question marks.
And it's a short week. Thursday Night Football has been unpredictable.
Yeah. But then Rams and Baltimore are both going to be good. So this is going to be a tough stretch, and just there's a lot of question marks then on how this Eagles team is going to just
Yeah.
develop. Have they gotten over whatever it was that caused them to really decline in the second half of that season?
Yeah.
It's going to be a tough stretch. It's going to be meet part of their schedule here, where if they can kind of come through here 500 during this stretch, maybe a little bit over 500, I think that'd be good for them as well. Because
Yeah.
really, in this NFC East, and if you haven't seen any of the other East offseason recaps and then their record predictions, we think this is going to be an absolute just battle to the death between all these NFC East teams. We don't think these teams are really going to blow away this division because there's a lot of question marks. And so I think if you're just able to stay around 500, I think you will be in the hunt for the division title.
Yeah, no, and I think this is going to be a big stretch for this team because, like you said, they're going to play Dallas, Baltimore, the Rams. I know Baltimore's in the AFC, but like Dallas and the Rams are going to be contending, I think, for their division, if not the one seed. So those games are going to be big. Both of those games are on the road, and then to me, they have 3 should be wins in this category, and that's the Giants. They struggle in New York, like you said. Washington, Thursday night football, short week, especially after playing Dallas, could be a little bit of a trap game. And then Carolina at week 14, they should have no reason to lose that game. So again, those 3 games they should win. All the others are going to be pretty closely contested games. And 2 out of those 3 games, I think they're not set up well. Like it's just a rough go for them. So closing it out here with the final 4 games. Pittsburgh, they should win. At Washington, they should win. Dallas, you don't know. And then hosting the Giants, they should win 3 out of those 4 to kind of close out the season, I think, well. But again, 3 division games. Division games are usually always tough. So never know, really.
Yeah. Now I will say this here too. I know I'm mistaken on this as well. They Eagles did end up beating them actually in 2022. So, but then they did go on a little stretch here against them. So people who are already writing a comment, I did correct myself there. But still, just a tough division rival though.
Yeah, division games are always tough.
Yeah, in general. Let me actually go check. I wonder if I got that in reverse actually, because here I'm able to check that. This is what it was. I got that in reverse. My apologies. The Giants actually had one in Philly. I got it in reverse. So you can correct me. But the Giants haven't beat Philly in Philly since 2013.
Okay.
So week 18 is a win.
Week 18 is a win.
Week 18 will be a win for the Eagles. So I got that reverse. My apologies. So, but yeah, I think that's going to be a much more favorable stretch during those final 4 weeks. So it's just that middle section. They can come out and get through that middle section because Pittsburgh, a lot of question marks as well. Washington, same thing. Dallas at home and the Giants at home. And so obviously they're going to win against the Giants. So, but there's still just a lot of questions overall. Kind of just this team, how they bounce back. Did they figure out whatever it was that was going on here? How are they going to handle the loss of the locker room leaders in Jason Kelsey and Fletcher Cox? And that to me then kind of leads into my record prediction. Yeah. As I said, this is going to be a bloodbath. I think of all NFC East teams. I think the Cowboys are going to regress. I still think the Giants and Washington are going to be top 10, are going to be picking in the top 10 in the 2025 draft. So I have them going 9-8 here, just because of just the questions still that are with this team. How is Saquon Barkley? Is he going to be what I imagine he was going to be, what he can bring to the table for this team, as I said earlier as well? How's this offensive line going to handle kind of some new assignments, especially with Jason Kelsey going on, as I've said? And how is this defense going to improve, especially in the secondary? Because I'm going to guess they're probably going to fall somewhere between 2022 and 2023 when it comes to sacks. So probably maybe 10th overall in sacks, which is going to be an improvement. But then if you can combine that as well with a much more improved secondary that can lock down on corners better, then I could see them going 12-5. But if it's still the same, maybe marginal improvements, I can see them being around 9-8 here, just because they have a tough middle part of their schedule.
Yeah, I kind of went in the middle of what I was thinking, because if they continue how they ended last season and like struggled, and I think you look at last year, like they really should have lost to New England. I think New England let them off the hook. The Minnesota game, they won handily, but in a very sloppy fashion. And like, so if they start out poorly and these locker room issues that were rumored around this team last year kind of continue into this year, I really could see this team going 5-12 and and struggling. But again, then I could also see them going 12-5 and really blowing things out of the park with
Yeah.
like with this offense and this defense getting a little bit of a rejuvenation. So I think go somewhere in the middle, 9-8, 10-7, maybe going slightly above 500 is where this team will land, because I do think they have some easier wins on their schedule, but they also have some really tough games. And so uh, on paper, especially at the top end, this is a Super Bowl contending team. But I think when you look at maybe like the quality of the depth or just some of the unpredictability of locker room issues, team chemistry, uh, I think that sets a pretty low floor for what they could accomplish in 2024. But I'm kind of rooting for the Philadelphia Eagles. I was a big fan of Jalen Hurts. I love the way he handled the situation at Alabama.
Yeah.
Even watching him kind of going through his NFL career and progressing that way, and even like looking at what happened with him and Carson Wentz. I liked AJ Brown. He was one of my favorite receivers in that 2019 draft class. Devontae Smith was another just great character guy. And so I do like this Eagles team, and I want them to do well. I just like there are definitely some pretty big red flags, I think, for this team.
There's a lot of reasons for pause. Like
Yeah,
especially then too. Um, there wasn't too much reason going into the 2023 season why we wouldn't think that they would be one of the top teams in the NFC. Uh, everybody made note, obviously, that Javante, who's the guy with San Francisco now, that was a defensive tackle, um,
oh,
Javante Graham or
Javon Hargraves.
Javon Hargrave. Sorry, I was Graham. I'm like, no, that's Brandon Graham. But everybody knew like he left. Be like, okay, like that's going to be a loss, but how big of a loss is that going to be? And then we saw a major regression, especially in the second half of that season. So there's something I think that we hope that they all figure out, because I agree with you that Jalen Hurts story is one of my favorite. We've been watching him play football now for coming up on a decade. Like that's what's crazy about it. Just seeing the ups and downs and see how he just has never let these kind of setbacks in his overall career stop him. It's admiring to watch. So I want to see him do well. And so it'll be fun to watch. The NFC East is always going to provide an amazing battle for the division title. So it's going to be
Yeah,
fun, especially too. So I think all these teams are going to be above average at best.
yeah, exactly. But I, I'm very excited to see it. It reminds me, maybe not to this extreme. Remember a few years ago, like when the Commanders won the division with no, like they were
With
eight and
Taylor
eight,
Heineke
or
and Alex Smith
yeah,
running
yeah.
half
Was that
legs.
2020? They were
Yeah, that's
eight and
funny.
nine,
Yeah.
and they had a losing record and they won the division. Maybe not to that extreme. Maybe like the Eagles are 10-7, the Cowboys are 9-8, and then like the Eagles are or the
Well,
Giants are 7-10 or something. Like I could see something
I'll
like that.
I'll do spoiler alert for anybody who's still watching this video 33 and a half minutes in. I give the Cowboys the same record at 9-8.
Yeah,
So, like, I think it's extremely possible that
yeah,
it's that they have a tied record and it goes down to a tiebreak depending on head-to-head matchup or division record or something like that. I think the Cowboys are going to regress significantly. I think the Eagles are I think the Eagles are going to be more consistent compared to what we saw last year, which was the highest of highs and like the lowest of lows. I think they're going to be more
yeah,
consistent, but I still feel like there's just going to be something that's not going to get figured out.
yeah. So I I'm very interested to see how it plays out. Let's go ahead and wrap this up here. If you guys have not already, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Leave a comment down below on what you thought of the Philadelphia Eagles offseason, and also let us know what you think of them going forward into 2024. What do you think their record's going to be? Let us know, but on that, we will see you guys next time.